Welcome back to The Change Physician. I am Melissa Cady, the Challenge Doctor, with my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro. And, Saturday Salutations all about saying hi, like, hi, Kevin. And
hi, Melissa.
and hi to the world out there. I'm actually going to cross-post this over to Challenge Doctor, so my own personal little other page can see what we're up to as well. Kevin might be busy trying to do some similar things, but so how are you doing, Kevin?
Oh, you know me. I'm doing well.
Doing well. Good.
I'm doing well.
So anything exciting over the last week since we've chatted?
What? God, you just attacked me here when I'm trying to post this stuff.
Okay, well, I'll talk about myself then.
I can't do two things at once.
I know. Well, why don't I do this? I'm going to share what's happened in the podcast.
There you go.
And recent releases and what's upcoming possibly. So today is March 10th. So this past Sunday, we released episode 239. And it was about Arnold Schwarzenegger. We never have really talked about someone famous or whether you agree with him or political things or whatever it is. There's some really interesting, twists and stories and turns in his life. And he's really the epitome of change. And I would say an awesome dude. Yeah. And there's not a lot of people willing. I mean, it's hard enough to be famous. Let's just say that. And not that we know, but it appears to be
based on my experience.
Yeah. So, I guess the thing is that you can at least appreciate the fact that, you have to contend with that. And then you have to, you realize everyone's watching everything you do, and he's made mistakes, and he's admitted to them, whether it was because he was found out or whatever the reason is, or come forth beforehand. Regardless, he's done so many different random totally different things in his life that, Kevin brought it up, and I thought, I agree. Let's just talk about him and his newsletter and some really succinct pieces of information he puts out there, especially in the world of fitness, because he's had quite a bit of experience with it. So any comments on that, Kevin?
No, other than, this was a total random thing, but I really like his newsletter, and I subscribe to a lot of newsletters. I did it for a long time just to watch kind of how people marketed. But the information is good. It seems very balanced. They reference things, and just no BS. I mean, they're not trying to sell you anything. I mean, I'm sure there's got to be something in there, because at some point, I think he has an app coming out or something, but he's very straight and to the point, particularly when it comes to fitness. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate it. So I enjoy it. I enjoy it quite a bit.
Yeah, especially when there's so much, information.
Garbage.
Helpful.
So much garbage out there.
Yeah, as a personal trainer before I became a physician, there's definitely, and also someone who really treasures, just the capacity to change our bodies and how they're amazing when you take it down a good path that is helps it become more resilient. I think it's nice to have that kind of information kind of filtered for you, so that you can be, not drowning in bad information.
Well, and somewhere along the way, and I bet we could sort of, if I had to guess, I would say the late 1800s is probably where I would start pinning this stuff. But there was a either a conscious or unconscious kind of paradigm shift to make people's bodies appear to be weak. Like somehow these things that we were born into and grow and have this massive capability of healing and resiliency, including the brain. There are so many people running around who are scared of their bodies, and every little sensation that they have has got to be something pathologic. Yeah. And it just drives me freaking crazy. Like the majority of the time, if you stand out and get out of the way of what your body does, you're going to be fine. There's acute interventions. You get a car accident, you're bleeding out. Obviously that works really well. But so much of the other stuff, the chronic disease conditions, people are just so terrified of moving their bodies. And all of a sudden they feel something like, oh, I can't move. I'm just thinking about, I can't think of a single chronic condition where moving more is worse than moving less. And yet the everybody tends to move less and move more. And then, I talked about the ad, I think one long time ago on a Saturday Salutations or Friday, whatever day we were doing it, when I went and saw my PCP, and on the wall was talking about, falls and whatever. And I was like, oh, they're going to talk about training and balance training. And no, it was an ad for something that if you do fall, which doesn't address the problem at all.
Yeah.
Like, well, you're just older, you're just going to fall all the time, man.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's like, you need us, give us your money.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to make you petrified of your own body. And we all know that anyone who understands somewhat of medicine or biology and can get down to the tiny microstructures, like the cell level, and, this many potassiums for this number of sodiums, all the pumps that are part of each cell and the billions of cells you have in your body. If we were trying to like control all that, we'd all be dead and extinct. Like, the body is freaking amazing. Yeah, you can keep, you can be intrigued, curious, not ignore some things that are kind of like progressively getting worse, in the sense of like, there are rare cases of some cancer and all that stuff. Like, you see a big growth in your head, don't wait till it's 4 feet wide. Like, there are some things that progressively can get worse. It cuts off your airway and you can't breathe. I mean,
that's just my horn.
It's just common sense of paying attention and not being in denial. There are definitely people that are in denial too. So,
yeah, but I do think we've lost common sense about this stuff, and people have just forgotten. And I don't know. I don't know if it's they forgot or if we've been taught by ads and advertising and everything else is literally almost all the time. If you just back off and let it rest and recover, your body's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. It's just insane, just crazy.
Yeah. Well,
anyway.
I mean, I tell people all the time, it's like, thank God your body's amazing. Thank God it stops bleeding. In most cases after surgery.
Well, that's an old anesthesia saying, all bleeding stops eventually.
Yeah. Well, then, as long as it really is stopping bleeding
before an episode on
tank is out.
Old anesthesia sayings, because what was the other one I really liked is, in the crisis situation, the first person's pulse to take is your own. I always love that one.
Yeah.
God, what else is there? Anyway, anesthesia's got great sayings.
Yeah, well, it's a very unique field that is very it's an enigma to a lot of people, because first of all, their consciousness is usually altered around the time you're getting it. And the surgeons are glad you're doing it, not them. There's just there's a lot of you don't really understand it unless you kind of do it all the time. Or see it all the time, at least to a certain extent. But yeah, once you're the patient, though, everything is, even when I'm the patient, it's so bizarre. But
did I talk about that last time? I had a colonoscopy. Did I tell you that last week?
I think so.
Yeah. I was bragging about my colon and how awesome it is. But that is like the first time I ever had anesthesia. Like I'm trying to think of other procedures I've had. I've only had like one other one, and that was LASIK. And that was hilarious because they gave me a Valium, I think, and they said, take this 20 minutes before I took it. And it had not hit by the time they started doing their procedure. It hit about 30 minutes after everything was done. So, that sucked. But it's just super interesting because, 1 minute, they're pushing propofol and you're just kind of like, and then the next thing all I remember is kind of hearing some voices and just open my eyes and looking at things. And it's just so weird how you can just turn off. But I guess it's sort of like, anesthesia is not the same thing as sleep, but no one ever knows. You don't know when you fell asleep. Like, and like, this is the moment I fall asleep. You don't know that.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
People feel like they're in total control, and that their perception, their awareness they feel like their recall of awareness is when they were awake. It's like I try to get across to people, like I give you relaxing medicine called midazolam from the pre-op area to the operating room, and you're still talking to me. And I've had, I can't reveal patient details, but there was one patient who was, related to this other patient, and they swore up and down that they were they were totally knocked out before they went to the surgery or to the operating room. I'm like, no, you weren't. You were talking to me. He's like, no, I wasn't. I was like, well, I'm not going to debate this, but every single patient is talking to me, or at least is capable of talking to me if I talk to them. In 99% of the cases.
I'm glad I didn't give me any benzo, because that's the stuff that I remember that too, like having really detailed conversations with people, and they're just like, oh, and like, no, I mean, I've never had anybody like reveal like crazy stuff.
Oh,
like,
it's rare,
but it is bizarro. And
but
anterograde amnesia.
Yeah, it's one of those things that people are, if you did not live in the 1900s, well, I mean, it started in like late 1800s or later 1800s, but let's just say legit, like more modern anesthesia, I would say 1900s and the 2000s, like there's no other generation of human existence that we know of that's had the capability of getting all these elective cases on a spur of a moment and be able to be asleep for them. Like just, it's such a, people are so used to our current modern civilization that they don't even like step back and look at the big picture of like, this is pretty remarkable that we can do this.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the risks are pretty low for healthy patients of bad things happening. But yeah, it's kind of a unique thing for our last couple generations, or few generations. So anyway, let's see, the most recent Thursday throwback, we had Maisha Claiborne. She's an integrative family physician that it was actually from episode 63 that we had interviewed regarding her going into neurolinguistic programming and hypnosis from her family, regular family practice. So she has quite an interesting path, and we have another Thursday throwback on her about coaching. So that'll come up this next Thursday, and we'll leave our next episode a mystery for tomorrow. So
a mystery tomorrow.
So, and I guess I'll just mention that my 10, almost 11-year-old cat is getting adapted to our new puppy. I have to say this story is kind of hilarious, because if Rico charges the cat, Zeke, then Zeke is hissing, not quite as strongly as before. But I'll say if the cat comes up to the dog, suddenly we had a couple episodes where our little puppy decides to lick the cat and threw it in disarray and like didn't know what to do with that. Wouldn't hiss, but I think it's kind of interesting to see, depending on when he feels threatened, especially Kevin, with all your training you do with understanding protection and stress or anxiety and threat, you see it like with the cat and the dog. The cat's approaching the dog and the dog is just kind of like standing there and doing all these sweet things, it's not going to like lash out. But the other way around, a little different story. So just another lesson of, is he threatened or not?
Yeah.
So anything from your side?
No, not really. I guess nothing too exciting this week. I'm gonna I've been doing a lot walking. Oh, my workouts are going really well. So the biggest thing is I will be hitting the big 5-0 in a couple weeks.
Yay.
And I was overlooking, because way back when, so 2 years ago when we started the podcast, and I was talking about my kettlebells a lot. And I've said it on other times, my goal was, for some weird thing, is to get to the 48 kilogram bell and be able to do the 10, that's basically 100 swings and 10 Turkish get-ups. Timed. I don't do it timed. And I'm not going to get there, but I was like, well, where was I when I started? So I went back and I looked at my birthday, because I log all this stuff.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, I was doing a 40-pound kettlebell, and I was introducing a 50. So I was transitioning to the 50-pound kettlebell. And right now I am on a 70-pound kettlebell.
Wow.
And I'm halfway through transitioning to the 88-pound kettlebell. So that's a 40 kilogram bell, and I'm trying to get to the 48, but it will probably, just looking at the history, it'll take another realistically 2 years probably. So next year it should be the 44 kilo bell, and then the 48 probably after that. So it's pretty cool. I mean, it's neat to look at that stuff. And that's one fun thing about kind of charting everything. And then I introduced walking. So I decided I'm like, I'm going to add something else. And so this
Outside?
year, no, I'm not. It's like everybody says that. And my wife's like, well, I literally like to walk on our treadmill. When I was training for way back when I used to run in San Diego and I was training for half marathons, I would run on the treadmill. I'm one of those weird people. I just like to run and to walk on the treadmill. It's this controlled environment. And I just get on there and I literally I listen to music and I do all the junk stuff that this wasted garbage that otherwise you would feel kind of guilty doing.
Lazy.
Like reading or flipping through Facebook or watching some stupid nonsense video or playing a dumb little app game thing. But I just do that. And then I walk fast. And this week I'll probably get 25 miles in. I was like, whoa, I'm going to get 25 miles in. And then I wanted to think, well, how many miles was I running back in the old days in a week? Anyway, so I was just kind of thinking about that. And I want to go back and look at those because I know I have those written down somewhere too. So I've really enjoyed that. So
you're the epitome of the changed physician. So you've changed your strength, you've changed some habits and added some walking.
You're
representing us well.
Yeah, and it's like we've talked about on the podcast all the time is just these small little increments. And most importantly, the biggest thing for me is creating these habits of health. Like once you've created the habit, it's like gold. I mean, you can always break them depending on how difficult they are. But I think a year ago we talked about this I have transitioned in such a way that activity is such a huge part of my life that if I'm not doing it, it's uncomfortable. So that's where you kind of know where the habit is set. Because if you're in a situation where you're not doing what you would normally do, what the default behavior is, or the default behavior that day is, then you know that your habit is somewhat established. And it is really weird. Of course, then I'm like, oh God, I wish I had started this in my 20s and but whatever. It's awesome. Like I know I'm going to be turning 50 and I feel stronger than I have since I was 18. I feel healthier than I have since when I was running a lot. I felt pretty good then, but I feel better now, I guess. It's cool. It's and I think that's why I get frustrated returning to the beginning of this conversation. Is that so many people start getting older and they fall in these age-related beliefs. And health-related beliefs and age-related beliefs are really, really funny because you start looking at the data behind them. They're better predictors of function than a lot of objective measures are. And people think that, we put all this, we don't talk about what people's belief systems are. And we don't challenge those belief systems. And instead, we tend to feed into these ideas that the older that you get, the less secure you are, the more frail you are, the more this you are, the more you can't do. And I do think it's just an absolute detriment to society because yes, there is some degradation that occurs with time, but it's certainly not to the extent that people make it sound. And it is nothing close to how bad it can get if you don't maintain or pursue or try to get better.
Right.
So that's based on my own personal experiences with that. So I'm heavily biased, but the data, as I always anecdote is fine as long as your anecdote is based on evidence. It's not anecdote based on or contrary to the evidence, which is another big pet peeve of mine. So get out there and move, folks, no matter what.
And the data, as you said, like things start like getting a little weaker or things get a little bit less resilient. Things don't maybe heal as fast. Like there is this decline that happens. The problem is when you completely don't take care of yourself, the decline is way more abrupt and you can hit hard, meaning, you can there's all kinds of things that can go on wrong. But by maintaining that fitness and the strength, just look at muscle mass. You're going to lose a little bit every year, every decade, and it's going to go. But if you are basically pushing it and helping it smartly, start low, go slow, and you maintain muscle mass, not only are you going to help manage your weight because your furnace, which I always like to hone in on since I was a personal trainer, if you don't have much muscle, you don't have a high metabolic rate. So there is a certain level of, for the most part, there are exceptions of things, but if you don't have good muscle mass, you're going to be more prone to falls. Your balance is probably not going to be as good. And you can just look at the data in general. Like if you want to maintain some level of independence and balance and strength, stamina, whatever you want to call it, you've got to put in the work, and it doesn't have to be like killing yourself every day. It's just the consistency. And I am like the biggest believer, based on data too, that that is the best thing for us to do. And our beliefs, unfortunately, are connected to our behaviors. So
I want to say unfortunately,
well,
because that can be a good thing,
but
yeah,
they're tied together regardless.
They're it's like, is the more and more you learn about beliefs and belief systems, the more in awe you should be of how powerful they are.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's in I don't know. So I know I talk sometimes and people might hear me, and and maybe this is my own negative belief, but I'm like, oh, that they just look at me and I can almost feel like they're just
shutting off,
thinking I'm crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and so often I just won't talk to people about it anymore.
Yeah.
And then they'll say stuff and I'm just like, oh my God, I can't even believe they're saying this. But I know what's going to, if I even open my mouth, this is my own limited belief. If I open my mouth and they're just going to get mad or, whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's cognitive dissonance too.
It is. And that's, that's the part about beliefs is they're designed to promote actions in kind of limited information context. One of the reasons for them. And they kind of provide a sense of self and a sense of internal coherence of who you are.
Yeah.
That can be very good if that internal coherence and that underlying system is designed in such a way that keeps you healthy, maintained, promotes positivity, relationships, recovery, that kind of stuff. But when your belief system is either been kind of damaged or maladapted in such a way that there are these limiting these factors where you believe you're older, frail, that you can't move, that everything you do is going to end in pain, it becomes this wicked spiral. And again, come back to the belief. The problem is beliefs are designed to be resilient. They don't like to change, and particularly the tighter and tighter and tighter you have to that kind of identity belief, because you have superficial beliefs that are more like attitudes and bringing them down. But and they're designed in such a way so that you're not totally willy-nilly. Because if you didn't have a belief system, then you wouldn't be able to watch QVC without going bankrupt. Because as soon as someone said, this is the greatest thing and you need to buy it, you'd be like, oh yeah, okay. And you'd buy it, right? But man, it makes it hard when people's health beliefs are wrapped around poor health or poor, maladaptive patterns of behavior. Mm-hmm. It is a freaking bear.
Yeah.
And everybody who's in primary care should know this, because you guys have the toughest job out there and you're dealing with belief systems all the time.
Yep.
And, it was like, well, why aren't those patients being healthy? Is step back and look at what they believe to be true and what is, what do they think is possible? And it is really, really hard.
Yeah.
really hard to change.
And the hardest thing is that when you entrench those beliefs, because they don't like to change in the first place, you go through 10, 20, 30 years of that belief that got you to the predicament of either you're 500 pounds, or now you got COPD, or now you've got this osteopenia or osteoporosis, and all these things over a lifetime that those beliefs you had created the behaviors or lack of behaviors that would have been healthy for you. You have even less, and this is just based on my perception, less belief. It is harder to believe that those things were true unless you're just so fearful and maybe you're going to like radically change your life. But I feel like it's so much harder to get people to wrap their head around that this little habit, if you had done it for the last 30 years or got rid of a certain habit, that would have made all the difference, versus blaming on genetics, or just whatever denial or beliefs you have at that point. I just feel like it's extraordinarily difficult, and it's like going uphill backwards with these people. And it just takes a certain like connection or trust or an aha moment for people to start doing that little thing to actually start reversing their life. Because for most people, it's really hard to make them believe that they could change their lives.
Oh, well, and absolutely.
Or feel different. Like they don't know how to feel any other way.
Yeah. And beliefs drive behavior, right? And then behaviors reinforce beliefs. So you got this wicked cycle going back, because if you do something over and over and over again, it will tend to revise your belief system. If you believe something, you're tending to do the behaviors that are associated with that belief.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, how do you change that? And one, you know, like for particular health related beliefs, one of the ways that you can do that is, instead of actually going after the belief, is go after the behavior. So if you can just get someone, okay, so someone is completely sedentary, and if you can just kind of persuade them or motivate them to start daily movement and then build from there, then over time, what tends to happen is then the underlying belief can shift. It takes a long time. But it's so, there's no quick fix. There's literally no quick fixes when it comes to this stuff. It's not, and we certainly don't learn about this in medical school. Like, we just learn the pills and this and that, and then we get all frustrated. Nobody's changing and won't do what we say. And you know, motivational interviewing has some of this, but you know, I'd say anybody who's really interested in motivational interviewing should start looking at sales psychology, because it is literally based on sales psychology.
Well, I'm not going to go, and I know we're going to finish off here, but I just wanted to make comment, because I just spoke with, I do my virtual anesthesia consults ahead of time, had one patient in particular, it has to do with all the pain stuff, interventions and everything. And even there was a moment, like there was a realization that, you know, because I mentioned something from a modern pain science, there was a little aha moment she was starting to get without anybody, because this person had multiple things done. And you start, sometimes it's through that experience for you to change your beliefs, when you realize, well, that didn't help. And okay, but my belief was, you saw that, so you fixed that. And what I still have pain? Like, so they were actually questioning their own belief, which is kind of, you know, I even said there's no reason to be ashamed. You know, you went through this process, you didn't know anything different. You're just going by the recommendations, but there's still, it takes sometimes experience, that the thing between your ears realizes, oh, wow, that belief's not serving me. And no, I don't want that done to me anymore. Like, unfortunately, that's how a lot of people also learn to change their beliefs. So it's so complicated.
Well, there's a little piece of dissonance in there. They had something done, it didn't do what it expected to do. So there's dissonance. So then it has to actually align something. You have to either change the behavior or change the belief.
Yeah. Well, this person's open.
Yeah.
This person's open to, you know, me just sending some links and learning about modern pain science. Oh, who happens to have someone they know in the medical training and medicine, who would probably be very interested in the modern pain science. So it was just really kind of cool. You just never know. You just never know who's ready to be the student. So, yeah.
Yes.
So you want to take us out?
Sure. Well, thank you all for joining us again for another Saturday Salutations, where we tend to talk about all the random things that come to mind. You can join us here most Saturdays. Sometimes we're on Sundays. And if you're interested in joining the community, you can go to thechangephysician.com. And until next time, stay well.
Take care.